Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev live with me, DJ. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. It seems like it's the first time. I'm really happy to be back. It's been a few weeks, and also the last two Hands on SAP Dev live streams that we did were they weren't live streams, they were premieres. So the last two Hands on SAP Dev episodes were premieres rather than live streams. So I've had to sort of reboot my brain, trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Still don't know what I'm doing. Very importantly, I've got my Stormtrooper waffle ready to eat. I've got my Hands on SAP Dev OAuth at 8 a.m. mug. Here we go. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. So thank you. Yes, brilliant. It's going to be a really good session today, hopefully. So welcome to Andrew down under, and welcome to Christian, Helmut, Patrick, Jay Eriksson. Hi to you too. Volker, moin, and Ankesh, Ahmed, Samuele. Good morning, Hawkeyes, and Napheat. Good to see Napheat, an old friend of the Hands on SAP Dev show. And Helmut, we are happy to have you back too. Oh, thank you very much. That's very nice. Thank you. So as you can see, slightly different setup today. I started early this morning and I wasn't quite with it. And I was thinking, why can't I get rid of that last bit of green on my green screen? And it turned out to be the go live button on OBS. So what a fool I am. What a fool. So let's get started. Let's get a coffee first. So Andrew says, I'm looking down here because I've got let me show you. I've got my new keyboard there. And it's wireless as well, which is quite nice. Got my wireless mouse, and I've got my Chrome, my Pixelbook, where I've got my YouTube Studio going on there, so I can see the chat. I should really make it a little bit bigger. My eyes are getting a bit old. So I've got that in front of me, so I can control the studio here. I've got the chat in front of me as well. Andrew is ready to go, also with a COVID jab and a glass of red wine. Is that a good combination? Maybe it is. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll approve of that. And Santiago, hi Santiago. So thanks everybody for joining. Let's get on with the episode. So what we're going to be talking about today is the Open Documentation Initiative. Now, what I want everybody to do is ask questions as usual. I mean, the regulars here know the drill, right? This is our show, not my show. So it's just as much your show as everybody else's, and you interact with the chat and everything. If you've not been here before, welcome. So we're going to be talking about the Open Documentation Initiative this morning, and I just want to walk ourselves through it, and we're just going to do stuff as well with it. But first of all, if you're not aware of the Open Documentation Initiative, Custodio, good morning. As long as you don't drink the vaccine and take the shot of wine. Yes, exactly. Well, maybe that would help as well. I don't know. No, it wouldn't help. Do not try that at home. The Open Documentation Initiative is basically our first steps at opening up SAP Help Portal documentation, or SAP Help documentation in general, so that everybody can collaborate on it and we can all work on it together to improve it, to make it better. And of course, I think it goes without saying that I, as a potential contributor to the SAP documentation as well, I don't work in the documentation team. They've got some awesome people writing documentation, but even me as an SAP employee, the prospect of being able to improve our documentation makes me quite excited. It makes me feel as though the documentation sort of partly belongs to me now as well, and I'm hoping that is also the same for you too. So there's a blog post here. The blog post is actually linked in the description of this video, but let me just share it with you anyway. And from there, that sort of describes the general overview, but we don't need to read through it together because we're going to be covering that. It describes the general overview, what it is. Note that this is a pilot program right now. So we're taking our first tender steps, our tender and tentative steps, no less. And we've gone live with basically, well, let's call it 2 documentation steps. I mean, maybe 1.5 documentation one main documentation set, which is the SAP Business Application Studio. So we've got some product documentation, and hopefully a lot of us on this show will be familiar with the SAP Business Application Studio. We've used it on hands-on SAP Dev many times. So, maybe there's going to be a connection there. So we've got the SAP Business Application Studio, and we've also got, as a documentation set, the contribution guidelines. Now, what are the contribution guidelines? The contribution guidelines are basically is a small set of documentation that we wrote to help you and me understand what this whole thing's all about, okay? And we'll be messing around with the contribution guidelines, having a look shortly, but there's a little screenshot there. And linked also from this blog post, just so you know, that's us now, hello Mom. Linked from this blog post is a further reading now, because I wrote a blog post yesterday and published it about how we want to recognize contributions, and we want to recognize them on SAP Community, using the badge mechanism, right? So we've got 2 new badges available. These are the collaboration mission badges. So there's actually a new mission category. So this is very special. A new mission category, collaboration missions. And basically, depending on how you collaborate, you can get one or both badges. And these badges sort of reflect, it's probably a good a place as any to describe what the 2 different types of collaboration that are available. And those, let me know in the comments if in the chat right now if you're already, let me know if you're not familiar with GitHub. Okay, and then I'll explain all about GitHub. But I think a lot of people here, I recognize a lot of people, and I know you're all familiar with GitHub. But basically, GitHub is this collaboration platform for source code, and source code can be source code, executable source code, but a source code can be also, documentation source code, Markdown, for example. And there's the wonderful thing about GitHub is that yes, it embraces Git, the distributed version control system, which allows us to sort of manage our files and content in a really good way. But the layer on top that GitHub provides allows us to work with each other, to collaborate, to work on stuff together. And that's why we're using GitHub to help us in this whole collaboration enterprise. Oh, Andrew says, so we can all become missionaries. Yes, I think missionaries is a good word. Yeah. I think anybody with going for this collaboration mission could be called a collaboration missionary. Yes, I think, Andrew, you've coined yet another term. So well done there, Andrew, on coining that term. Moin to Burak and Christian. What is GitHub? Never heard of it. Never heard of it, Christian. Well, thank you for throwing me that line. Basically, I think I've already explained what GitHub is, but we'll have a look at GitHub shortly as well. There are 2 ways you can collaborate. And these ways are described in the collaboration guidelines, which we'll look at shortly. And they're also described in the blog post. But basically, this is a nice summary, right? You can either provide feedback or you can contribute content. And you can provide feedback by raising a GitHub issue, okay? Let me know in the comments, in the chat, if you've already raised an issue somewhere, someplace, in a previous life type thing. I think maybe some of us might have already done this in the context of our developer tutorials on the tutorial navigator. You can raise an issue if you see something's amiss or afoot with some of the documentation, some of the tutorial content. So you can raise a GitHub issue, and we'll do that shortly as well. But you can also contribute content. You think, let me give you an example of where you might raise an issue to provide feedback. It's like, reading through something, I'm not quite sure that it's hitting the mark. Maybe it needs a bit of a rethink or something, or no, that's not what I'm looking for here. We really should be talking about X, right? So there's nothing concrete that you as a contributor can supply. You can't, supply some extra wordage, for example, but you can sort of point something out. So that's where you would provide feedback. Okay, and of course, compared to contributing content, providing feedback is a really nice, very low friction way of starting to collaborate. if you see something like, a typo or something that's missing that you could quite easily add yourself, or, a URL link that's wrong, right? These are just examples, right? There are many, many different ways you can contribute content, but these are like nice, small, easy ways. You can provide content via a GitHub pull request. Now that sounds to some people a little bit like, whoa, what's all that about? But actually, we'll do that today. Now, where's the? Oh, there we go. There's my phone. I always have the phone in front of me to see what time it is. So yeah, we're doing all right for time. So David, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Nicola as well. Good morning. And Andrew says yes to issue raising and yes to contributing a potential improvement. Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, potential improvement, because that's the thing as well. I mean, I'm very keen to be open and try and be as open as I can. And not every piece of feedback is going to be implemented. Say that from the outset. It might be a mistake, that it might be a misunderstanding, whatever. And not every piece of content that we contribute might be relevant, and it's all about a conversation that will happen between you and the documentation person on the SAP team that's going to be dealing with the feedback and talking to you about it and talking to you about the content contribution. But where there is value, where some feedback results in an improvement, or where the content that you contribute is merged into the documentation, and of course it's brilliant. So and the phrase is thank you so much, and the key word is this is valuable. So we're going to award the badge, right? Anyway, enough of that so far. What shall we have a look at? Yeah, so let's start out. Let me go back here and jump to the contribution guidelines. So here's an example. I want to show you what that looks like. Now, I'm not sure how widespread this new design of the SAP Help Portal is. It's rolling out. It's going to be rolling out, at some stage in the near future. But we've been very lucky to be able to use this for our pilot for the Open Documentation Initiative, and we like it very much because it's got this newly designed sort of toolbar here at the top. And the key thing to notice is that if a documentation set has been sort of turned on for or opened up for the Open Documentation Initiative, you will see either or both of these two buttons. I mean, we all know the favorite button, the download PDF, the share, etc. These two are new. And you can sort of guess from what we talked about, from how you can collaborate, there are two different ways to do it. You can either provide feedback on GitHub, or you can edit on GitHub. So before we press one of those buttons, let's just have a quick look at the documentation for the SAP Business Application Studio as well. It's exactly the same thing, right? Edit and feedback. Now, let me just stress again, we may roll out a piece of documentation set where the documentation team is not quite ready to receive content contributions, but is ready to receive feedback provision, right? So there'll only be a feedback button there, or there may be no button, So this is how we're rolling this out, sort of hopefully slowly but surely. So there again, what is SAP Business Application Studio, and so on. So Aman, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. You're a big fan of your courses since my childhood. Since your childhood. Brilliant. Have been following your videos on SAP as well. Aman Vajne, welcome, and thank you for joining, and thank you for saying that. I think we all learn from each other, don't we? And that's what this is all about. So thank you. Oh no, I've put my Stormtrooper waffle by the side. I need to put it on the top of the coffee. Otherwise, it's not going to go soft. There we go. Right. So welcome, Aman. Now let's go back to the contribution guidelines, because this is important for us to read and understand at some stage soon, as in, and this explains hopefully how you can contribute. So I've been sort of rambling on for a few minutes as to the two different types of contribution. That's described here. It also says you need a GitHub account. They're free, so you just sign up and go for it. I think many people here will already have a GitHub account, but if you don't, it's they're easy. There are two types of contribution: providing feedback, you hit that button, and providing content, contributing content, you hit that button. Right? We'll do that without reading through this anymore. We'll do that now. The really cool thing, oh, by the way, if you're not aware of or not that familiar with GitHub, the other brilliant thing about GitHub is that you can have, quite fine-grained notifications, so you can get notified when you're mentioned. It's a little about SAP Community, but there is even more ways to sort of filter and notify and, keep track of what's going on for your feedback provision issues and your pull requests, for example, and conversations, right? So keeping track of your contributions. Basically, this also says, right, we're not claiming ownership of what you provide. So, it's really important to understand that, this is a collaboration. This is not like us saying, give us your stuff, right? So that's really important. So you can go through all this in your own time. This talks about those badges. And I noticed actually when I was looking through this morning that, and this is maybe what we'll do, the documentation feedback contribution badge and the documentation content contribution badge, those phrases aren't very good. I can say that because I wrote those phrases. And since I wrote those, we've got the badges and we've got a better name for them. So maybe we'll change it. Maybe we'll actually provide some content to edit this together and we'll go through the whole process. Is that a good idea? Andrew says, what kind of contributions are sought? Style, clarity, content, something missing? Perhaps you will come to that later. That's a great question, Andrew. Basically, I think all of the above. I think what's in my mind at least is that as we collectively start out, what would be a set of easy wins is, I've noticed a typo there, or that could be phrased a little bit differently so it's clearer. I mean, we'll have a look shortly, and Christian, I think Christian's on the channel. Yes, Christian has provided some content already which improves the documentation. We'll have a look at that example, so that gives us another idea of the sorts of things that we can provide. So thank you, Christian, as well. Anyway, I'll remind me to come back to this SAP Community profile thing for recognition, but that's a bit further down the line today in this episode. We've got some do's and don'ts. Basically, the key thing to know, and I think we all know this here, the key thing to know is that this is not about opening this up as an opportunity to ask for product feature improvements or improve. There's a problem with this particular. There's a problem with the application studio. There's a problem with, CAP, or there's a problem with, BTP cockpit or whatever. It's not about this. This is about the documentation itself, right? Let's embrace that. Anyway, so there's how to provide feedback, right? How to create a new issue, provide new feedback, and so on. And then how to provide contribute content. There's a little bit more in there. Talks about Markdown, talks about style, talks also a little bit about, what a good contribution looks like as well. Okay, so that's enough of us reading the documentation, because I'm very conscious that this is hands-on SAP dev, so we need code on the screen or at least doing something. Have a bite of this. Any questions so far? Napit says, or maybe some code examples. Yeah, exactly, Napit. That's brilliant. That's another brilliant example. Small snippets of code, or maybe like a command line invocation of something. If it improves the documentation, then good. I always do this, don't I? Okay. So why don't we have a quick look before we dive into sort of doing things? Let's have a little bit of a look around. I've got some things here. Yeah, here we go. So the way we do this, by the way, the way we're doing this, we've looked at how other organizations have done this. I'm not gonna not talk about this, but one of the brilliant things is that this is being done by awesome people in organizations around the world. So, for example, we looked at how Microsoft were doing it, and we talked to those people, and they'd be really helpful. Similarly with GitHub, IBM are doing this as well. It's a wonderful thing, right? So I think it's great that we're also doing it with you. So we have now on GitHub a relatively new organization, which is like it's like a user, but it's an organization, a collection of repositories, specifically for SAP documentation. And we've got the two repos that reflect the two documentation sets in the pilot. We've got the BTP Business Application Studio repository, and we've got the Contribution Guidelines repository. Okay, if we have a look in there, for example, and you can all see this, let me share the link to the SAP-docs organization, because then you can have a scoot around there and have a look. Let's have a look at here. Now, you will see that the structure, let's sort of be familiar with the structure as well, because a lot of us here will want to sort of dive into this the way we've structured this is that at the top level of the repo, at the root, as it were, we've just got a README file. We maybe have a contributing file, depending. Otherwise, the contribution guidelines themselves are the things. And then we've got a license, of course, and the reuse thing, which is this, license-related mechanism. And then the actual content itself, the documentation content, lives in a directory called docs. So everything that's on SAP Help Portal, the Markdown source for that, is in the docs directory. Okay. We manage our documentation source code internally in lots of different ways, including from this DITA, right? So DITA, if you're wondering what that is, that's a CMS. That's a content management system. So there's lots of mechanisms behind the scenes managing the synchronization and the merging of content between GitHub and Markdown and the source on DITA, for example, in this case, right? The contribution guidelines, on the other hand, the source of truth for that is actual Markdown in the actual repo on SAP-docs. So that's something we'll look at shortly as well, right? So all the content itself is in here. So if we were to say, for example, here, I'm looking at the restart a dev space. Okay, if I hit edit, I will be taken to the Markdown source code for that page there to change the state of a dev space to running, blah, 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 blah. To change the state of the dev space to running, blah, 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 blah. There's that URL thing there. There's that URL thing there, etc. So this is Markdown, nicely rendered sort of by default on GitHub. And it's exactly the same thing. It's rendered in the SAP Help Portal. And there we are. And we can see where we've landed, right? So now we know that this is SAP-docs organization. And we know that the repos in that organization sort of represent the documentation sets. We know, oh yeah, okay, this is where I am, BTP Business Application Studio. And where specifically we are in a file, a Markdown file, that is obviously relates to the restarting a dev space page in the docs directory, right? So where do we go from here? I mean, we'll just go take one tiny step further. Where do we go from here? Well, okay, well, the nice thing is that we land here and say, yeah, this is the page that I was just looking at, which is this one here. So yeah, I'm confirming in my mind that I am where I want to be. Right, now I'm ready to make a change. So I then go and hit edit this file. We're on GitHub, okay? And we go into edit mode. Now, there's one thing that I want to show that we're not seeing here, because my user ID QMacro, I'm one of the administrators of this repo, so I can edit this directly. I won't do, right? What I want to show you is what it would look like for you. And I've got another user ID on GitHub, QMacro dev, and we'll do it that way instead, okay? But basically the flow is you'll make your modification, and then you'll propose a change, okay? So let's just leave this here. So there we go. How are we getting on, by the way? Any questions so far? Okay, so in that case then, now we sort of know where we land in a repository, in a file, in the docs directory. We can start to edit, right? Santiago says, is there a roadmap to do it in different languages? That is a fantastic question. It would be interesting to extend the knowledge. Yes. Now, internally, there is definitely discussion about different languages. We're not quite there yet. But that is on, let's say it's at least on an internal roadmap. Okay. These are very early stages, Santiago. And, like I said before, I'm very keen on making this like let's try and walk before we can run. Even though, some people would say, and rightly so maybe, that, multiple languages is maybe a fundamental thing. I don't know. But yeah, we're talking about that already. So, Helmut, good question. Oh, sorry, someone first. I definitely need to take out my glasses. There we go. Yes, documentation is transforming into wiki. Wow. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, edit on the page. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the wiki features, isn't it? One of the fundamental wiki features. Talking of wikis, the inventor of the wiki, Ward Cunningham, what an awesome person. I met him a few times at OSCON. What a wonderful person. Anyway, Helmut says, Helmut, I like your questions. Do you use an MD linter? Yes, we do. And let's have a look at that. Remind me, okay? In fact, let me just jump to... No. I'll just remind me, Helmut, because we're going to look at that. In fact, Christian will know that we do use a Markdown linter. Maybe a little bit too much at the moment, because that's my fault. But I got a fix for that. I'll leave that cryptic sentence just hanging there, and we'll get back to that, hopefully. Yeah, it's only 8:25. Right. So, what we're going to look at... Yes, let's have a look at these two tabs here. Issues and pull requests. On every repo, well, not every repo, but most repos, you'll have an issue tab and a pull request tab. Issues are the units of work, let's say, the containers for feedback provision. Okay? So when you want to provide some feedback, when you hit that feedback button. Well, let's hit it now, right? We'll hit the feedback button on the Restart of Dev Space. Bang! We go into the Issues tab in a new issue sort of, form here. The title is pre-filled. We just stick something in the body, which you should leave there, and then you can type your, blah 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 blah. I think this, that, the other, right? Submit your new issue. And then you start that starts the conversation with your correspondent on the SAP documentation team side to look at what you're saying in that issue, in that feedback. Okay, so that's that. So let's just close that. Don't want to do an issue there. So, for example, Antonio, is Antonio on the call today? I don't think he is. I'm not seeing. Well, Antonio, shout if you're here. Antonio raised. We've got a number of issues we've already closed. We'll have a look at those shortly. But Antonio says he's provided some feedback for what is SAP Business Application Studio. So this is a really nice example of there's something in the general what is. But actually, there could be a little bit more information. The fact that it is, and is very correct in this statement, is based upon the open source Eclipse Theia project. Okay, so perhaps there should be mention of that. So rather than, Antonio could have sort of added a paragraph saying, by the way, blah 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 blah. That would have also been good. But maybe Antonio was thinking, well, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. So I'll raise it as a bit of feedback rather than content contribution. It was Antonio's choice. I think in this case, either would have been great. So there we go. There's an example of an issue that Antonio opened yesterday evening. Let's go back. And Ivona, our friend, Ivona's been on Hands on SAP Dev, our friend Ivona. What another awesome person. And here's an issue. And it's more of a technical issue, as in a rendering issue. Yeah, that's not quite right. There's some sort of rendering issue in the SAP Help Portal. So that's also a genuine issue. So brilliant. Well done, Ivona. Let's have a quick look at the issues that were closed. So, for example, let me pick one up here. So Tammy. I think Tammy was our first feedback contributor. And Tammy says, this looks a bit weird. Okay. And here's an example of us actually saying, well, it's by design. This sort of tells you that this link here takes you out of the SAP Help Portal sort of area here. So in this case, I replied saying it does look a bit odd, but actually it's by design, blah, 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 blah. And I closed it. Okay. So, don't be too perturbed if you provide some feedback and it's like, well, it's meant to be like that or whatever, perfectly okay to sort of reopen it and say, well, actually, no, I disagree, blah, 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 and have a conversation. It's all about the conversation. It's all about the collaboration. Finally, Greg Mizurek, Greg Not So on Twitter, Greg provided some really cool feedback to say, by the way, you can also open a terminal by doing a right click on the directory in the Explorer. Awesome. And what we did there, what we're doing is we want to recognize these contributions, in a sort of a regular cadence, award these badges. So there's a badge like we saw for, valuable feedback. This is valuable feedback. So Paula, one of our documentation team members, also an awesome person, adds this label. Okay. And this label is not a magic label, but it's a label that signifies that this is valuable feedback. And we've got this mechanism that then goes and asks the feedback contributor for their SAP Community profile URL so that we can then award the badge. Okay, we want to keep at the moment, keep the GitHub ID and community profile ID things separate because, well, partly because of GDPR, we shouldn't really maintain any sort of linkage between them. So we're doing it this way instead, right? So there's an example of some really cool feedback that was recognised as being valuable. All right. Ooh, is there a preference, Andrew says, to provide feedback before a contribution? Not necessarily. Now, that's interesting you asked that because if you look at the way GitHub does it, if you provide a pull request, you're sometimes asked to provide an issue that pull request addresses. Okay, so maybe that's partly what you're thinking of. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's a nice model. But we want to keep it a little bit simpler, so either is okay for now. Hope that answers your question, Andrew. So Christian says, I've said this before, but I want to mention again, this is a great initiative. I'm really loving it. Christian, thank you. I'm not just saying this because, I've got my SAP badge on and everything, but I think it's a great initiative as well. Partly because it's open and partly because it involves us all together, right? That's the whole point. So Andrew says, Christian Drum, are you feeling well, COVID-wise, that is? Yes, I hope you're recovering, Christian. Good to see you online. So there's example of some issues. Let's just look at pull requests. Okay, we got a closed pull request here. I thought that was an exciting one. That's just me doing something, right? So let's ignore that for now. So here we go. Here, Christian yesterday opened a pull request, content contribution. Okay, and this is a really nice example of content contribution. Going back to your question, Andrew. So Christian was reading through and. Basically, I added a table into the notes regarding trial accounts. This is in relation, of course, to the Business Application Studio. And if we look at the files changed, so within here, we've got tabs along here, code, issues, pull request, blah, 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 blah. But within a pull request or an issue, a pull request and an issue are essentially at the core the same thing. It's a conversation. It's a love letter to each other, right? You can look at the commits. So Christian in this pull request did one commit. So as in, committed something, saved something and pushed that as a thing. And in that commit, what Christian did is he removed, see the red lines are sort of, deleted and the green lines are added. Christian sort of basically reformatted the way this was. This was in some sort of, well, in fact, we can have a look at the rich diff and see what Christian did. He got rid of that thing there, which was like lines and a little bit hard to read, and provided a nice table instead. Beautiful. Thank you, Christian. I mean, how good is that? So there we go. So that's what Christian provided in this pull request, in this docs working with a trial account. Okay. A number of checks took place. And now this goes back to your question, Helmut. We've got a Markdown linter. In fact, let's go and look at some code. We've got a Markdown linter. We've got some configuration in there, but basically the Markdown checks, we're using this Markdown lint node package. It's really cool. I think next Friday, let's do a hands-on SAP Dev session digging into the automation and the mechanics for those of you who are interested in that, if that's helpful. It's super interesting. Oh, hello. What's that? Go away. There we go. So that is that. Let's go back. Did I open another window? Oh, there we go. There. Right. So that's that. So now, hopefully that's enough sort of overview. Why don't we now go and provide some feedback? In fact, no, let's not provide feedback because, I think we all know how the flow works for creating an issue, providing feedback. So let's now go and do a content contribution. Okay, let's do it together now. Some coffee before we start. Any more questions? Andrew says, I was thinking about a discussion before simply lobbing in a pull request. So thank you for asking that, Andrew. I think it's brilliant the way that you ask these questions, honest, open questions, right? Because it allows us to say, well, a pull request is only a, what's the word I'm looking for? A proposal. Okay, it's not a you need to accept this, right? It's a proposal. It's like, yeah, I think this. And the pull request, as you can see here, if we look at this one here, improved readability. It's quite a long, this is quite a long thing. Well, all right, there's some stuff down there, but it's quite a long thing. You know, I added a comment as well saying, sorry, I messed up. The Markdown linter linted too many files that were, you know, not right. Yours is fine. So I'll talk about that maybe next Friday. It's a conversation. So an issue is a conversation, and a pull request, being the same sort of, you know, internal thing, is also a conversation. So it's perfectly fine to start off with a pull request as it is to start off with an issue. Because in some ways, a pull request expresses your intentions directly. You've made some changes to that Markdown, and we can see exactly what those changes are. So rather than sort of, you know, have to, you know, metaphorically wave your arms about and describe what you think should be different, you're showing what you think should be different. So I think a pull request is a perfectly valid first opening gambit, okay? Because it's all about the conversation. So Christian says, Andrew Bernard, thanks for asking. Yes, everybody well? We're all well. Okay, good. That's good. Good little injection emoji there. Right, so let's go to, in fact, let's open an incognito window. GitHub.com. I've got an ID called QMacroDev. Okay, that's me there. Ooh, hello. And I'll sign in as QMacroDev. Okay. So as you can see, you know, this is a fairly empty user ID. I've got 3 test repositories. I've been using this for testing, obviously. So I'm going to look at, in Codoc, I'm going to go to the SAP Help Portal and go to the contribution guidelines, right? There. And, sorry, that was a bit of a large, loud slurp. Now, I'm going to look at the contribution recognition. I think, oh, documentation feedback contribution and documentation content contribution. That's not quite the right phrase, is it? Introducing, let's go to the bottom here. Let's get the right phrases, right? There we go. Collaboration missions. The right phrases are Open Documentation Initiative provide feedback and Open Documentation Initiative contribute content, right? So that's really what these badges should be called. So I'm going to say, right, I think I can improve this page. So I'm not going to open feedback. I'm going to provide content. So I'll click the edit button. Where am I taken? I'm taken to the SAP-docs organization, and I'm taken to the repo that represents that documentation set, the contribution guidelines documentation set, and I'm taken specifically to the page, the recognition.md markdown file, in the docs directory, which is where all the documentation actually lives. In fact, let's just jump there to have a look at the top level. You can see it's the same pattern, right? You've got the README, the general sort of, you know, this is the README, this is documentation set. We've also got a contributing.md, but the rest is the same, right? The docs is where everything lives. Okay. So, yeah, this is the page I was looking at. This is the thing I want to change. You can see I DJ with my QMacro user ID have been working on this, and also my wonderful colleague Leslie has also been working on this. So I'm going to hit edit. Right now, this is what we didn't see before. GitHub says, "Hey, QMacroDev, that's me up there. See, you're making a change in a project you don't have write access to." Well, clearly, you know, I as QMacroDev and you are not going to have read-write access to the contribution guidelines repo in the SAP-docs repository, right? You know, doesn't make any sense. So what GitHub automatically does for you is it creates a fork of the project. It makes like a copy of the contribution guidelines repo. Where does it make the copy? In my own space, in QMacroDev's space, right? We've created a fork of this project for you to commit your proposed changes to. Submitting a change will write it to a new branch in your fork. We don't have to worry about that yet. So you can send a pull request. So just, you know, follow the yellow brick road, follow your nose. And I am now going to change. In fact, let's go here. Let's copy this. There we go. That looks good. And content. How's that? That looks a lot nicer. Now, some of us may be perfectly happy viewing Markdown in its raw form, a bit Matrix-like. But basically, it's also a preview, right? So you can have a look. There we go. That looks nice. Go back from preview to edit. Now, I've finished my edits. I don't want to change anything else, right? A nice, short, sharp, small, perfectly formed proposed change. And that's the key word here, proposed change. Goes back to your question, Andrew, right? So Andrew says, I just noticed there, I do need to make this text bigger next time. Thank you for the elaboration. So we should feel free to raise feedback and likewise feel free to provide a suggested improvement. Absolutely, Andrew. Absolutely. Glass of wine in hand or not. So I'm going to propose a change. So use the official badge names. The badge names in there, in here, are different to what they are described until now here. Okay, so the more you describe something, the more you describe the intent of your proposal, the better the conversation, right? So propose changes. Now let's look what's going to happen. By the way, before I even propose changes, let's go open up a new tab, look at me again. You saw the test and the test one and the contest repos. I've now got a contribution guidelines repo that's been forked from the SAP-docs, right? So I'm going to propose change. Now, this looks like quite a complicated screen, but it's not. It tells us everything we need to know, right? I mean, you could just go through and just click the green buttons, take the happy path, click the green buttons, click, 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 and you'd probably be fine, right? But let's just understand, because hands-on SAP Dev is all about understanding what's going on. Let's understand what's going on. Where are we? We are not anymore in our Q macro dev space, as it were. Look at the top of the page. Look at the URL. We're in SAP Docs contribution guidelines now. Look there, SAP Docs organization contribution guidelines. What are we doing in here? Well, we're creating a pull request, right? We're about to create a pull request. This looks quite complicated, but actually, this is the most important part. This is just saying, look at the arrow, right? I'm not sure which is the right way. But anyway, as in me pointing on the video. What we're proposing here is to send a change from the patch 1, that's an automatically generated branch name, in the Q macro dev, that's me in my test with my test person hat on. In my repo here, I want to propose that change to the main branch, and then GitHub works this out automatically for you in the SAP Docs owned contribution guidelines. As in, I want to send a change from a branch in my fork of that thing back to the origin. Okay. Discuss and review the changes in this comparison with others. Keyword discuss. Keyword review. Have a conversation, right? And just before you submit it, just before you hit create pull request, you can sort of see what you're proposing to change. Okay. Now, the way that the diff works here is that it's worked out that actually, you've not changed the documentation word. If that looks a bit like whoa, just hit the rich diff. And that gives you a really nice sort of overview of what you're about to propose, right? Create pull request. Now, that sort of confirms that's what you want to do. You haven't created the pull request yet. It gives you now the opportunity, if you hadn't already, to add a bit of description. I think it would be good to align the names. Okay, create pull request. And just looking, if you're wondering what's down here, it's basically saying you've made one commit, one change, and there's the change that we've seen already. Create pull request. Where are we? We're in the SAP Docs contribution guidelines. Hit create pull request. Bang! So now the pull request exists. The conversation starts. The collaboration starts to flow, right? Andrew, a pull request sounds scary. What are we doing? All we're doing, actually, I don't think we've, I'm not eating the biscuit. I don't think we've actually meditated on the phrase pull request, have we? Pull request might sound a little bit scary, but actually, if we break it down, it's a request to pull. What does that mean? It's basically, if you think of this relationship between the main source repo of truth, the contribution guidelines repository in the SAP-docs organization, and in this example, we've got my DJ's QMacro devs, and yours would be in your case, your fork of that, your copy of that repo. You're requesting that some of the changes that you've made be pulled into the origin repo, be pulled into the SAP-docs version of the repo. So it's please pull my changes in and have them. Okay, that's all a pull request really means. So thanks for asking that question, Andrew. Okay, the rich diff, perfect. Yes, rich diff, rich tea biscuits. I need some more biscuits. So the conversation. So even the tab is called conversation here. We can see in this pull request what changes, what sort of units of change have been made. I've only made one change. Use the official badge name, and there's the little extra information there that I've typed in there. We can go straight to files changed and see what we've seen before. And if I want to make further commits, I can do that, but that's for another time. But we can also see the checks here. Okay. Now the checks, we'll have a look at the details of the checks next Friday if anybody's interested. But we've got some automation saying, now administrators and SAP documentation owners should be allowed to obviously change content at this level. Change we're not going to change the license, but you know what I mean. change anything here. Change the git ignore, change the reuse, change the .github, the workflows, change the main README. I might need to make some modifications. My colleagues might do. But from the community perspective, we're only looking for you to actually contribute changes to the documentation, which lives inside the docs directory. So what this does is make sure, just in an automated fashion, that if the person making the change is not a member of the admin team, okay, then what we want to do is we want to check whether there's anything in there or anything not in the docs. Now this is you don't have to worry about this. This is for next week if you're interested in how all the mechanisms work, right? All you need to know, if you even want to know that, is for your pull request, all the checks have passed. Show all the checks. You haven't made a content change proposal that's changing something you shouldn't be changing. The Markdown linter has done its work, and the Markdown that you've provided is fine. The Markdown linter itself, I think, yes. If we have a quick look here, right at the bottom of the style guidelines. No, wait a minute, where is it? GitHub repositories, contribution guidelines, docs, style guidelines. Don't think it's in the other thing yet. There we go, yeah. We've got some Markdown linting rules. In fact, let me share those with you, Helmut, if you're interested in those. Share those. You can have a look at how that works and what the rules are that we're using, okay? Helmut says, details about GitHub automation next Friday would be great. Thanks, Helmut, for the confirmation. Let's do it. Okay, so where were we? Sorry, I'm getting distracted, aren't I? I'm distracting myself. I can see that there's some reviews required. Of course, this is looking now from your perspective, as in my QMacro dev perspective. But basically, this pull request needs to be reviewed. Right? That's all this is saying. This can't be merged until somebody on the SAP documentation team or the administration team has reviewed this, have a conversation with you. Okay, so let's go across to here. I'm logged into GitHub as github.com QMacro. I think it's me. Woo, big case. Yeah, signed in as QMacro. So I will now go with my other hat on, with my admin hat on, GitHub repositories, contribution guidelines, and I can see pull requests. Da, da, da. There's the pull request. It's green, which means it's still open. It was opened by QMacroDev, that's my test persona. And there is a review required. So I can go in there and it says, oh yeah, QMacroDev requested your review. So this is how the SAP documentation team people will see this. And I can say, oh yeah, that's quite interesting, blah, blah, blah. I can also leave a comment. I can even, I can just say, oh, that's quite nice. Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Yeah, whatever. Right. I can check the checks. But the most important thing is I have a look at what's going on. Yes, that looks good. Great. Review changes. I'm going to review those changes. Looks good to me. And in fact, you might see LGTM sometime because that's short for looks good to me. So that's what, if you see that, that's what that means. I'm going to approve those changes. Okay. Me, DJ, as in QMacro administrator. Submit review. Bang. Okay. So now if we go back here, looking at this from the QMacroDev perspective, this is the incognito, the dark mode window. Changes approved. One approval by QMacro. Thank you very much. All checks have passed. So I'll go back to QMacro. I can now merge it. Now, of course, QMacroDev can't merge it. Not allowed. But the administrator, e.g. me with my QMacro hat on, or an SAP documentation team member, can merge that. Let's merge it. I've got 9 minutes left. Amazing. Okay. What's not occurred here, okay, is the community recognition, because I've already gone through and made a change as QMacroDev before, but we'll do that another time. We don't want to do everything in one session. So I'm going to merge this. Do I want to merge this now? Yeah, I want to merge this now. Merge pull request. Let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, am I ready? Yeah, I really want to confirm this. I want to really do the merge. Okay, so now what happens? The status of the pull request goes from open to merged. If for whatever reason the conversation resulted in, oh well, thanks for that contribution, but actually at this time, it's not right to include that, then we just close it. It would go from open to closed rather than from open to merged. But because this one has been accepted and been merged, we now also want to recognize the fact that this is a quote unquote valuable contribution. Okay. Oh yeah, I did remove my other stuff before. So yeah, so this would do this. So now what's happened is that because, and Helmut, this is, and if anybody else is of course interested, we've got an action that will look out for merged pull requests and automatically assign the contribution label. And we've got an action that looks out for label assignment of the contribution label and checks to see if that person has already been asked for their community profile ID. And if they haven't, we ask them for it. So then we can go down the route of awarding those badges. Okay, but we'll do that another time. So that's merged. So now if we go and look at pull request, was 3, it's back down to 2. You can still see the pull request in the closed. And of course, as the author of that pull request, right, we can see it's merged. If I go here, I can of course see it here, right? Here in the closed. And in fact, just a by the by, I used to ignore well, not ignore them deliberately. I never really saw them properly, but there's some really cool global links at the top bar here in GitHub. I can see pull requests, ones that I've created. QMacroDev, for example, there we go. There's the one that we've just closed, right? So this is a really nice way of looking at it. In fact, this shows you, if we have a look, no, I'll have it another time. So now, wouldn't it be cool if we have a look at this here? We can see 2 minutes ago, once I merged that, we've got a mechanism that will synchronize these changes back to an internal repository on one of our internal GitHub Enterprise server instances inside of SAP. And it's from there that we then bring the content to the SAP Help Portal. Okay. Now, in the last few minutes, I'm wondering, oh, Andrew. Andrew says, what is the contributor license about? Now, we didn't get that in this example because as QMacroDev, I'd already signed it. But basically, we want to protect us, but we also want to protect you in terms of content ownership and make sure you're aware of, how the content is going to be treated from a copyright perspective and all that ownership perspective. So the contribution license agreement, there's a CLA assistant that helps with this. This is actually from SAP as well, but lots of projects use this. It basically puts up front the agreement, like you're contributing stuff, but it's still yours basically, but we can use it. And this is you saying, yeah, okay, I'm cool with that, right? So for a first-time contributor to a repository in SAP-docs where this thing has been turned on, for example, you have to say, yeah, I'm happy with that. So in fact, if we go to, where was it? You've done that, haven't you, Christian? Yeah, let me go to codoc, Git repositories, this one here. In this pull request from Christian, you got that, didn't you? And Christian clicked the thing. It said CLA not signed yet. Christian clicked the thing, went through, read the thing, said, yes, I'm fine. And it's done. It's all handled in GitHub and the CLA assistant. So that's what that is. And there is, where is it? There is somewhere. Let's go here. Help Portal content, contribution guidelines. Yeah, there we go. There's a section on it in the contribution guidelines that explains a little bit more. Not very much, but there we go. That there. So I'll just share that with you there. So where are we? Oh yes. So improving usability. That was that one. Clear that one. That one. That one. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So we got to the stage where it's like, oh yeah, what's going to happen now? What we saw was in the GitHub repository contribution guidelines, we saw an action that had synced back to internal. Now, what I'm going to do, in fact, no, let's leave that till next time. No, let's do it now. Let's do it now. I'm going to go to my super secret thing because I don't want to sort of github.tools.sap. I'm going to go into here, right? All I'm going to do now is go into the contribution guidelines, check that the external sync has come in. Yes, it has. So now, sort of secretly, I'm going to go into the, what's it called? The magic button. I'm going to check something here because we should be able to do it within the time remaining. I've no idea what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, 8:53. So the stuff was pushed to there, 8:53. I'm going to say publish that. There we go. Press next. Just make sure this is. Oh, what's going on? Wait a minute. What's going on? One. Oh, sorry. I'm adding the wrong thing. One second. Everyone. There we go. Add group. Next. Right. So, drum roll. This may work. And if it doesn't work, it's my fault. Right? If it doesn't work, it's my fault. Shall we go to... let's just refresh there. Shall we go... Let's just flip back... to the documentation, SAP Help Portal content, contribution guidelines, contribution recognition, not ready yet. It's not, come on, there we go, it's worked. I'm quite surprised myself that I did everything right. So there we go, we've changed, there's the change going all the way through. We saw the issue on the Help Portal, we hit the edit button, we made the change, we submitted that pull request, we had a bit of a conversation with myself. As administrator, I said, yeah, that looks good. I merged it, some mechanisms happened, some synchronization happened. Then I manually, this is what we're doing at the moment, this made sure that that change was then published to the Help Portal, and there we go. Now, in reality, it's not going to happen that quick, right? So be aware right now that, and this is what I've also found in submitting my own pull requests to Microsoft documentation and GitHub documentation and other documentation as I was researching, how this generally works with other organizations, which is in an awesome fashion. These things sometimes take days, weeks. Okay, I've got a pull request out with one particular thing. I raised it about 5 weeks ago. It's still not quite there yet, but that's okay, right? So these things take time. I wanted to do this quick one though, just to show you the whole process. And that's it. Oh, I've just wiggled my camera. So give us a shout on the comments here, on Twitter, anywhere. If you've got any questions, or even, in comments to the blog posts. I hope that's been helpful. So Helmut says, thanks for showing how it works. Well, I love good documentation. It's often better to see it in action. Yeah, I like to see it. Let the dog see the rabbit, as it were. So Tiago, and welcome as well. And Christian, I can't see. What's that? I can't see my glasses. Champagne, and yes, woohoo! And yeah, there we go. So thanks for joining. See you next Friday. We'll do a bit of a deeper dive session on Friday for those interested. And until next time, have a good, safe weekend. Take care of yourselves, and bye for now.